Thanks everybody for joining us. This is PLP Pathways webinar number 7. It's our 7th episode of the year and in our 2nd year. And I'd first like to thank I'd like to thank the Middle Grades Collaborative for sponsoring us, as well as the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education. Today we have a pretty packed agenda, and before we go any further, I would like our co-contributors to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Maura Kelly. I teach 7th and 8th grade humanities at People's Academy Middle Level in Morrisville, Vermont.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hunt. I'm a 5/8 generalist teacher in Williston at Williston Central School.
I'm Allison. I teach 9th, 11th, and 12th high school science at U32.
Thanks again. It's been a while, and it's that part of the year, I think, where not only are we planning for the remainder of the year, but folks are starting to look forward to their professional development. Mm-hmm. And the pace of the year seems to pick up right about this time. Yep. Before we go any further, I'd like to just remind folks out there about some professional learning opportunities. And Lindsay Hallman is joining the call as well. First, I would like to remind people that on April 12th, the Vermont Youth Lobby is hosting a youth rally for the planet that's happening in Montpelier. They start at the Vermont College of Fine Arts, and then they march actually down to the State House, and they have the opportunity to meet local legislators and talk about what's happening and their concerns about the climate. We went last year. It was a really good event. We're also going to attend this year. That's happening again on April 12th. Next, I'd like to remind people that on May 2nd, the Power Squared conference is happening at the Lake Morey Inn. It's actually called the Power Squared Youth and Adults Shaping Vermont Education. That's sponsored by Up for Learning. And again, that's at the Lake Morey Inn on May 2nd. And finally, the Middle Grades Institute is going to be happening from June 26th through June 30th at Champlain College. That's a great opportunity to have either individuals or teams focus on the middle level and Act 77 get together and do some great work for the next year. Does anybody have any other professional development opportunities that they would like to highlight moving forward? Anybody?
I was just
okay.
Can I add the youth rally piece?
Yep.
Do you need me to introduce myself?
Yep.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Hallman, and I'm on the Edge Academy team at Essex Middle School. I just was going to add with the youth rally piece that a number of my students are helping to plan that, and in the past, it has been a high school, a high school student-led rally, and this year they're really looking for more middle-level involvement, and it's been really powerful for my students to be part of the planning process. And so I would not only encourage people to attend the rally on the 12th, probably at this point it's hard to get into the planning because we're getting so close to the end, but for next year, they really are trying to expand it so that middle level students are involved. And I think this fits with a lot of what we're doing around their projects and the personalization piece, and they're just helping them feel more empowered to make change.
And Lindsay, just an invitation, we're going to be leaving from our school at 9:45. So if your kids want to come over in the morning and check out the program and check out what we're doing at Main Street Middle School, it's just a short walk over to the State House. So if you have any inclination to do that, just let us know. And at the moment, what we're trying to do is set up a presentation of our green team and sustainability actually on the State House lawn. So we'll be right out there after the march.
Awesome.
Yes, that sounds good. There's a lot of opportunities out there. And one thing that I want to start out with is sort of this discussion of equity. Maura and I interviewed Helen Beatty from Up for Learning at on our last PLP Pathways webinar. And we're really starting to hear more about equity and concerns about equity with regards to personalization and Act 77. And when I say starting to hear about it, I just mean that different people I've talked to have this concern about equity, and if all students are having equal opportunities across the state regarding Act 77. And just real quickly, this is what the Educational Quality Standards, this is a quote The 2014 educational quality standards replaced the former school quality standards. These are State Board of Education rules, the purpose of which is to ensure that all students in Vermont public schools are afforded educational opportunities that are substantially equal in quality and enable them to achieve or exceed the standards approved by the state board. And I guess the first question I have for folks is, how are you thinking about equity and equitable opportunities, not only in your classroom, but maybe across your school or even between schools? And Maura, I'll start with you, and then we'll just go right around and hear what people have to say.
I think one of the things that we talked about when we were having our conversation that came up was about how some of the work that we're doing can be very teacher directed in terms of the spaces that teachers are carving out for their students, and also access to resources and those different pieces. And I think it really comes down to schools coming up with sort of what their vision is or what their expectations are. And I don't think that it means that every team needs to have the same experience, or a kid on one team, they must go on have the same stuff. Because I don't think that's what the purpose is of this, but I think coming up with a statement of sort of the minimums or whatever the non-negotiables are, the commitments that they're making to students and families around personalization, just to sort of clarify, because I think it can create tension but in schools.
Okay, Lindsay.
Yeah, so I see it like on two levels. So like the school-wide equity piece, I would totally agree. I think that, you know, each team has their identity, and their vision and their mission, which really drives the opportunities that they provide their learners. And so I don't think there's like a one-size-fits-all model, but I do think it should really be based on team identity and what the team values. But then, you know, so on our team, when I think about equity, we take our kids out into the community a lot, and we try to connect them with real life experiences and with community partners as often as possible. And, you know, a lot of people ask that question, how do you get kids off campus? Well, you know, we take them off campus. And if we were to purchase, or if we were to get a bus every time we were to go somewhere, we would never be able to leave campus. So, you know, we tap into the resources of our families. I would say maybe only 20% of them are available to drive, if that. And then we use the resources on team and think in a really creative, flexible way about how we can get kids to meet with others in the community so that it is equitable, because it's often the kids who, like, if we were just to say, you know, your child wants to go and meet with this partner after school, that's not equitable. So we're going to do it during the school day, and, you know, and that's part of their PLP, that's part of their project. And that's my job as an educator, is to figure out, problem solve, figure out a way to get them to, you know, to meet with people in the community and to have these opportunities so it is equitable. And that's really been a big part of our projects since the beginning of the EDGE team, is figuring out how to make it happen during the school day.
Okay, Kevin?
Yeah, it's actually, after watching the interview and listening to this conversation, I've been thinking about equity a little differently, because I've always considered it just in terms of resources and what, you know, all of our students have one-to-one technology, and are we all giving them an opportunity to get out in the community, or at least bring the community into them? And then I got listening to that conversation, just like that piece around language of learning. And I'm thinking even from team to team, like we all have our own identity, but like, are we providing equity in the language that we're learning and giving them access to having like a student-centered experience? And that's one grain size within a team. You know, with us, we have 4 teachers on a team, and we're all on board. But then I'm thinking within the school, how different it is from team to team, and the different project-based pieces and approach to the proficiency-based and the PLPs. And then I think even bigger grain size than that, you're looking at, you know, district-wide, and then you getting various statewide. And it's just like, it starts to blow up there. And it's an interesting conversation. I love that, you know, Maura talking about, you know, I feel like there should be non-negotiables, but don't want schools and certain teams to feel like they're losing their identity. So it's such a hard, balancing act to keep everything together and keep both of those things moving forward and working effectively together.
All right, thank you. Allison.
I want to speak to something you just said, Kevin, about like statewide equity. I think in Montpelier and in Essex and in bigger cities, that lends itself so well to opportunities in the community. In really rural schools, like I would define our 7 through 12 as very rural, and any branching out, any mentors that work with students come to the school just logistically. That to go anywhere would definitely require a bus for us. So not only equity like in your class, in your department, in your school, but statewide will be expected to be equitable. We'll never get like Montpelier versus like a more rural community. We'll never have equity in terms of opportunities from the community that they can offer.
I guess what I would say is like, I think that, right, like Montpelier, if I were to teach in Burlington, we could just get out and walk at the town and visit people. But Essex is actually fairly removed. Fairly removed in the sense that we don't have a town around us, and so I think that when we think of community partners, we think of like, the beekeeper down the road or the farm down the road, or so it's the artist, whatever, there's always so many people within the direct community that we feel like we have access to. But then we do take our kids off to Burlington or to Montpelier. Like I'm taking some kids to Crosset Brook to meet with students there next week because we're really interested in learning more about their chicken project and making that a part of our school efforts too. So sometimes I think that's what Vermont is like. Sometimes you gotta travel to find the people, right? Or they have to travel to you. And that makes it much easier. And then when you talk about equity, you've got a great expert that can talk to your whole team or your whole class, and that's a whole different level.
Can I add something? Oh, sorry, Don.
No, absolutely. Go ahead.
I think one of the things that we have to sort of keep in mind too, and I think Lindsay and Allison, you kind of brought this up for me. One of the things that's so amazing about Vermont and education in Vermont is that it's so community-based, and a lot of decisions are made at the local level and have been kept that way because of such strong sort of community ties and local control. And so when I think about that, I also think about, when we're thinking about experiences for kids, we really want to reflect the community that we're a part of and really embrace that, and thinking about how to really encourage those local partnerships more, because they are so powerful. And I think there's some really great movement there, and it's really difficult, but I think reaching out as much as you can, even if it's just creating authentic audiences for kids, it's so important. And I think it can take a while in a school to start to find those people, but just by asking around, it can be really helpful. I just took my students, we're studying the Great Depression, and I was interested in, I was hiking on Elmore, and I saw a plaque that the Civilian Conservation Corps helped build some of the pieces around there. So I started kind of wondering and emailing people, and I emailed the Vermont Ski Museum because they built a lot of the ski trails, and they connected me with a ski patroller up at Stowe who's this historian. And so I took my kids to Stowe, and he was telling us like all about the history. Now he's like, do you want me to take your kids to Waterbury and do a walking tour? And I would have never known unless I just started like honestly begging people to give me some information. But it really is like trying to tap into who are those resources around you and noticing things and spending time in your community. I think it's really important.
So once again, you ask a question and you open up a huge can of worms. And one of the things, just to kind of recap, I think it was really interesting when you look at grain size, when you hear Kevin talking about the language that we're using about personalization, and then you talk about teachers and what are teachers being expected to do regarding personalization. And then you heard Lindsay talk about the identity of teams and what they're doing with personalization. And then this idea of a school, having a school vision that somehow reflects the community within which they're working and learning. And so I think that obviously this is going to have big implications, especially when you consider if you do have a kid in Burlington and you have a kid in Morrisville or Highgate, what's their experience going to be, and what connections can we make between those experiences so that we can develop, and it doesn't have to be the same understanding, but how are we going to show people what can be done and how this can benefit kids. And obviously this conversation is far from finished, but some really great points and ideas and perspectives, which is excellent. And now, kind of attached to that, believe it or not, this has been a sort of a week of firsts, but we have I have a question from a viewer, believe it or not. And so Rob DeSico teaches at Milton Middle School, and he's been watching some of our PLP Pathways webinars, and he has a ton of questions about personalization and PLPs. And so I asked him if he had one question he wanted us to address in today's webinar, and this is it. And it kind of relates back to what we were talking to previously. He asks, what would it look like, sound like, and feel like to walk through the hallways at a school that has realized the full potential or power behind personalized learning? And what criteria could one look to or look for to determine schools that are using personalized learning at really high levels? And I just wanted to hear from you guys what you think that would look like, a school that was really full on with personalized learning and that was operating at a really high level. And why don't we start with Allison?
By no means does my class look like this, but in my mind, it would look like a really chaotic architectural firm where there would be teams. And this happened a little bit in the engineering unit we just got out of. It was absolute chaos, and it was wonderful. And I just had conferences with kids about it, and they said that that's the best science experience they've had so far because it was so hard. They made so many mistakes, but they were so proud at the end to present what they had made. So that's what I think of when I hear that question.
Kevin?
Yeah, I have I guess a similar view, just a lot of different things going on, a lot of different paces. I feel like it would be a little loud, and from the outside looking in wouldn't look traditional, and then it would be seemingly a little chaotic. But yeah, I just feel like you would see, and in a previous in-service that we had with Williston, I forget the name of the book now, but there's a school out in California the smaller school that does this. I don't know if any of you know what I'm talking about. I think it's
it's
what's the name of the documentary?
It's like, oh gosh, it's High Tech High.
Yeah, so they have this where like every student basically takes their own personalized look at the curriculum, and they just kind of go and I think their projects are linked under certain themes, but it's just that's when we were watching this documentary, it felt like just watching it was, wow, there's just a lot of engagement going on. There's a lot of, these kids interested there. They're asking the right questions. They're reaching out to people for help. And that's what I would picture. It's just kids kind of floating around, tapping into any resources they could find. And I guess really using every one of the transferable skills, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from, the past 8 years. We've been, in a model, it's constantly, changing and evolving, but, where we have a project block every day. And I would say that it's hard for the outside to really understand what's going on unless they were on the inside. So it looks messy. It looks chaotic. It looks busy. But I have to say that when I'm talking to kids, I have the most rich and dynamic conversations, and it's my favorite part of the day. And I'm not someone that likes chaos. I like everything in order, and I'm like things really organized. So I find that, like as Allison was describing, what, her hopes would be is that, and what she experienced in that lab, there's lots of things happening in all different parts of our space. And sometimes kids are outside, I'm taking kids outside, some, into the woods, and some kids are out right now, collecting sap for our sugaring operation. And we've got people that are meeting with community partners in the learning center. And there's a lot of moving parts, and you kind of have to be all over the place. But I think that's what I love is like the energy and the excitement from the kids. And I would highly recommend, doing a little search on High Tech Highs. They have a lot of, besides that documentary, which I can't remember the name of, which is awesome. There's a lot of videos that are out there on YouTube about High Tech High. And then they're just an example, but I think that gives people a picture of what the possibilities are. But it's busy and it looks chaotic, and it doesn't look quiet and organized, and like everyone is, sitting there, absorbing all the information because they're at their computers or they're on the floor or they're building something, and there's, it might be a little messy and noisy. And so I think sometimes that's perceived as like chaotic, and it's not, and so I think we have to change the perception of what learning looks like in schools. And if you go into businesses or companies or anywhere else besides schools, it's loud and messy, and there's stuff happening, and people are working in groups or they're working in solo, and they got their earbuds in and they're focusing, or they're out and about. And I think that we try to really just keep things so contained in our schools that we're worried about these experiences and what they might look like. And I think we just need to realize that those experiences are where the deepest learning are occurring. That's me preaching.
I think everyone really brought up like the messy part of learning and thinking about what learning looks like. And it's not a straight line. It's kind of all over the place. And I think, the kids would be really clear on what the goals are or what it is that the outcome is that they're striving for. And it might change over time, but they have a clear vision and they know what the teacher is expecting. But then you would have kids sort of in different spaces. Some kids might be leaving. There might be kids recording things in different ways and collecting that evidence. So there might be kids interviewing each other or taking photos or, remembering to write a quick sentence or two in their learning journal or whatever it is. And however they record the best, and really thinking about how it's like a choose your own adventure novel. Okay, this is the goal. How are you going to choose your path? Okay, so you came up to this roadblock. Here's your 3 options. What option are you going to take? And so, I think it really, the kid really would feel like the driver. And then the teacher, if you walked into a room that looked like that, I would imagine that the teacher's probably sitting with a group of kids or like on the floor with a group of kids, having a conversation, giving feedback, guidance, not telling them what to do, but maybe asking questions and leading them there. And so, you wouldn't see the teacher in the front of the room, or it would just look very different.
And I mean, my immediate thing is I believe that you would see a school that was a lot more tactile. And by tactile, I mean, you would walk in and you'd see examples of student models and a lot more student art and a lot more student photography. It would be more of an art gallery and sort of learning center than it would be, kids in rooms. And I also think some of what's happening here, for example, I said that Thursdays were a little nutty. On every other Thursday from 11:30 to 12:30, we have senior citizens come in and we have kids teach them with technology. And it started out 3 years ago, and it's fantastic. And that would be happening in the computer labs. But we have a pretty good relationship with Orca Media. And so we have kids going down to Orca Media and using their resources to film and edit. Mm-hmm. And so I think it would be that mix of having the community come to your school, and also having your school go out into the community. And I think kids become much more content creators than content consumers. And I also think that, this just blows my mind, is I think we need to really be talking to kids, not as adult to kid, but as just kind of person to person. And I think we're still in this frame of this relationship with kids that is still sort of, you need to do this, and not allowing the kid to discover why they need to do it. So I think there'd be a lot more discovery. And I do think that the PLP for me would be the central part of the kids' experience. That would be this one gathering place for all their evidence, this kind of showpiece. So that if I stopped a kid in the hall and I said, hey, can you show me some evidence of your learning? Maybe they could have their phone out and they could show me real quickly some pieces of evidence, maybe video, maybe a picture, maybe a photograph of what they've done. But they would also have the language to describe that, and the language to explain why that was important, and maybe some of the skills they needed to achieve that, and then the strengths and challenges that they had overcome or they had relied on to get there. And I want to sort of tangentially, I want to go back to, Lindsay does this whole negotiated curriculum, and I've been trying to do it for a long time, and I finally said, all right, we're doing it. And so I thought that a negotiated curriculum, basically was, okay, kids, we're going to do negotiated curriculum, pick your topic, I'm going to help you get there, right? And man, that went like a lead balloon, okay? So I had one of those periods where I said, this is what we're going to do, and crickets. And I was like, I started asking them, what's going on? Why aren't you interested in this? And what I've been reading about and feeling is that kids need to develop an understanding of their relationship to learning, right? So many kids are passive learners, and no matter how hard we try, it's teacher directed, and it's teachers telling kids what to do. And we need to change that paradigm so that kids are thinking about what makes them a good learner or how they like to learn. And so the next day I went in, I said to the kids, I got some questions for you. Number one, what questions do you need to ask to learn? Number two, how do you learn most effectively? What are your strengths and challenges? And I forget the last one that I asked them, and they just knocked it out of the park. You just watch these kids talk to each other, and they came out with a list of the questions, of the skills, of their strengths and challenges. And I think that's what you need to build on. Is it all comes from the kids, right? And that's what a school would look like to me. Would be the kids were partners much more than just being kind of shepherded around the building by adults.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
Say, that's where we start in the beginning of the year is questions and concerns they have about themselves and the world. And that's the work of James Bean that we adopted to fit our model. But it has to start with their questions. And I think from day one, when you honor their questions, and then you also talk about, build the community. I teach middle grades organization right now at St. Mike's, and working with a bunch of pre-service teachers. And I brought my students as the expert panel last night and also to consult with them on their teams, at their simulated teams. And one of the things that really struck me when they were sharing about what's different about this type of learning environment is the relationship they have with my teammate Phil and I, in that they really feel connected to the adult in a different way than just the teacher-student role. It's like that they know that we will listen to them when they have, concerns about whatever it may be, and then advocate and then help them problem solve. And that was really powerful for me to hear around their learning, not just the daily stuff that we have. Everyone has their, stuff that they're dealing with, but around their learning, and really like, oh, you're interested in that? Like they said, you really value like what, our questions are, and you don't diminish them because they might sound weird or not relevant to us. And that was really powerful for me to hear, and that it really comes primarily down to the relationship and the community that you build in the beginning. And that's what the pre-service teachers were really like digging into, was like, tell us more about that. Like, how does that really set the stage for this type of a learning environment?
Any other thoughts from folks about, maybe the role of students and what a personalized learning experience that was throughout the school, what that would look like?
Oh, can I jump back to something that you were saying? And it was kind of about this idea of passive learning. And it sparked something that I heard when we were interviewing Helen Beatty about learners' own misconceptions about how people learn, and how that there are still students who really believe that they learn the most when they're taking a test or when they're sitting in a lecture. They really believe that their brains are doing the most effective learning, whereas so much research is coming out that's showing that that's not actually the case. And so one of the things thinking about the beginning of the year next year and thinking about getting my students ready was really thinking about teaching students more about the brain and how the brain learns in like conjunction with growth mindset and scholarly habits and transferable skills. Because I think that's a piece that I'm definitely missing. I have a student who we have morning meeting, and every once in a while he'll be like, why can't we just get to the learning? And I'm like, well, because it's so important to build relationships and to be a part of the team and have that identity as a group and like all this stuff. And I think they're missing, like as adults, we understand it and we understand the importance, but I think we need to start really talking explicitly with our students about that.
Okay.
Can I jump off
Any
that
other?
Maura, for a second?
Yep.
So that's so interesting to me, Maura. So why wouldn't we ask our learners when they think their learning is happening most? Right? If they're saying I'm learning most and I'm taking a test, whether that's proven by scientific research or not, that is still their belief.
Right.
So if that's true, like what does that say about how the classroom would then kind of be modified to their learning most? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think, Kevin, did you have a comment?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so I just, one of the things too that I forgot to mention was, I think a school that was operating on a personalized learning level, if you asked the teachers what they were doing and why they were doing it, they would say, this is the feedback I got from the kids. And it's just unbelievable to me how powerful feedback is, and how using Google Forms and these easily available tools, you can get feedback instantly about what's going on in your classroom. And whenever I have that feedback, when I tell kids, you know, we're going to work on this skill today, and a kid says, oh man, why are we doing that? Well, 92% of your classmates said it was pretty important. And that sort of feedback, like, how was your experience today? How did you learn? What could we do better? I think once you start getting that feedback, it creates a culture of excellence and a culture of respect and a culture of contribution, and it changes the role of the student. And I would say that's, you know, probably one of the biggest changes in my practice over the last 5 or 6 years is the constant, you know, harvesting of student feedback and then using that to direct my learning. So that's just something else that I would add in there. So again, this is a great conversation, and it's, you know, it kind of continues, and I really appreciate everybody's input. I guess the last topic that I want to bring up, we've, over the last, I'd say, month or two, we've started to get a few more tags on our YouTube videos and a few more followers on our Twitter. And what do people think we can be doing to increase our outreach, or are there any suggestions out there to places where we could get our message out, and so that we could be connecting with more educators? And if we could just start with Maura, and then if you have any suggestions, that would be great.
I don't have any suggestions sort of off the top of my head. I think there could be some real value in doing more displays of like student work and student samples and interviewing students. Would be a nice way. I think it's it makes it helpful for people to visualize what work we're doing. So that's not like a place to go to, but maybe a thing to create.
That's okay. Good. Lindsay?
I was just thinking that in the last few sessions, I've every other Thursday evening at 8 o'clock, if you're on Twitter, which I wasn't for so long, and now I'm finding it to be the most valuable tool professionally for me. There's the hashtag Vermont, ED conversation, and actually a lot of the people are middle level folks, and the conversations have been so rich and dynamic, and it's a number of educators from around Vermont, and then people hop in that aren't even in Vermont, and I have really enjoyed those conversations. Tonight the conversation's about scheduling and what that looks like, and then I think the next one in 2 weeks is going to be around restorative justice and restorative practices in school. And I am learning so much, and I've also connected with so many educators, and through those, I don't know what that's called, like Twitter conversations or. Yeah,
I know it's the VT Ed. It's the VT Ed, the scheduled discussions. Yeah, and I've seen, if you're out there, and I know that Lindsay and Kevin use Twitter quite a bit, and when you tag PLP Pathways, that always makes me happy. But it's good that you guys are doing that, and the conversations have been really good. And in fact, Lindsay, I want to talk about one of the retweets that you did in just a second. Kevin?
Yeah, just piggybacking off of that, I was going to suggest the more we can, I guess, tag or hashtag bigger groups like VT Ed. I know we have a great connection with the Tarrant Institute, who they get a lot of followers. So I think the more we're posting with the hashtag PLP Pathways, and then also tagging them, then their followers will see it, which in turn will have them check our stuff out. So the more we can just start tagging these other groups who have more followers than we do, I think that's because it'll just help grow exponentially and get our message out there. I think that's one of the quicker ways to do it.
Okay, Allison?
I noticed that one of our webinar videos was up on the Up for Learning website. I think making those really grassroots partnerships, connections is the best way, because then like-minded people will be able to find us when they find them.
Yeah, and I just want to, in closing here, I do want to point out, just remind people of some good resources. And you just mentioned Up for Learning. Again, we talked to Helen Beatty. And if you go to the Up for Learning website, they have a ton of resources that connect to personalized learning. But then Lindsay tweeted a graphic of from this organization called Students at the Hub. And I don't know if you've gone to that website, but Students at the Hub is a really, really good website related to personalized learning. It's sponsored by the Nellie Mae Foundation, and it's also sponsored by the Jobs for the Future. And it's one of a participant in another class that I'm in, got some resources from there. So again, that's Students at the Hub, and they actually are looking to partner, I think, or to feature teachers who are doing the work that we're doing. And so that would be one kind of final resource for you. And then last thing too is all of your blog posts have been great. Kevin, that was a really thoughtful blog post this last time about project-based learning. That was really good. And I appreciate everybody's really hard work. So I think our next webinar is the third week of April. I'll get that on the calendar, and I'll reach out to everybody and make sure that we have that planned. Does anybody have any final thoughts or contributions? Everybody's good. All right. Well, thank you again very much for everything you do. These conversations are great. It's a reminder that there's that VT Ed Twitter conversation tonight. Thanks again to the Middle Grades Collaborative for sponsoring us, as well as the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education. And for all those teachers out there, keep doing what you're doing and keep working hard. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you soon.